I'm sure all of you have friends, all of you have family members, so you're going to be able to relate to what I'm talking about here for just a moment. How you have those family members, let's say you have a brother or a sister, or maybe it was you yourself, that no matter what you did wrong and no matter what mistakes you made, there was always somebody in the family, whether it was mom or dad or the grandparents or the aunts or the uncles or whoever the case might be, that always seemed to make excuses for that individual, seemed to not hold them accountable for what they did, seemed to not hold them responsible, and in fact, always would blame the other side. Let's say in a sister situation, the sister was starting the crap and the brother responded, yet the parents only happened to notice what the brother did and completely absolved the sister of any blame, or vice versa. Unfortunately, that's how life goes. Sometimes that's how it happens. You also know how you have that friend or family member that, let's say your friend, that everybody else tells you is dumb or everybody else tells you is a bad friend, but yet you sit there and stick by them because for whatever reason you view them to be a truly great friend. You know how you have those friends that you seem to give them everything, and yet they inexplicably give you really nothing in return, yet you seem to continue to stand by them, you continue to be friends with them, you continue to support them because you feel maybe that that's the right thing to do. I look at the situation of the U.S.'s relationship with Israel, and this definitely fits into this kind of category. And it's another example to me of what I see that concerns me so much in stupid America. We have to understand that the propaganda in favor of the Zionist state of Israel, the pro Israeli, and this we need to separate here. This is something that we need to establish. This is not a religious thing. This has deeper ulterior motives. But there is no question that ever since the 1940s in this country, the pro Israeli, pro Zionist, anti Palestinian propaganda in your national mainstream, lamestream, state run, corporate owned media is astounding. No matter what, Israel can do no wrong. No matter what, they are always the victims. No matter what they do, it's somebody else's fault. No matter what they do, you can always find fault elsewhere. No matter what they do, the U.S. will always stand lockstep, arm in arm, shoulder to shoulder with their greatest and favorite ally of all. And I guess my question is ultimately, just like in life, where you have that family member that everybody tries to tell them that they're being stupid and that they're wrong, but they do the shit anyways, but you still love them because they're family. Well, on the flip side, you have that friend that you sit there, or maybe you're the friend that everybody tries to tell, that you're being stupid, that you're doing things wrong, that you need to stop doing this. And yet excuses and justifications are ultimately always made, and the friendships still stay. Well, you look at the relationship between the United States and Israel, and this clearly plays out. And I think it's about high time in this country that we stop supporting and stop propping up the state of Israel. This, to me, is one of these clear and present examples where the only sides that benefit from this are the politicians in Washington, the industrial military complex, and the Israeli politicians as a whole. The Israeli people lose, the Palestinian people lose, and most importantly of all to me as an American citizen, we as a people here in America ultimately lose. Now, of course, some of the spin and propaganda that you will be given in your history classes during your schooling from the media itself was that the formation of the Zionist state of Israel was something done in response to what happened, the atrocities of the Holocaust in World War II committed by Hitler in Nazi Germany. And with all of these displaced Jewish people all across the world, they needed a place to go to. They needed a place where they could feel welcome. That's the propaganda that you're given. And, on the heels of what happened with World War II, obviously it was going to be very easy to spin that into a pro-Zionist spin, into a pro-Zionist agenda. Now, this whole thing of having a state of Israel goes back to biblical times. This goes back thousands of years. This is an example of people being able to coexist, yet at the same time being at each other's throats for thousands of years. And of course, America, as we so often did, viewing ourselves as the world's great authoritarian police force and being the morality police, sat there and decided to intervene where we had no business. But we did have business there, but not the business that you've been led to believe. The whole reason for the formation of the State of Israel, do not get it twisted, was to put in place a pro-U.S., pro-Western democracy in the heart of the Middle East, especially at a time where you had the expansion of the Soviet Union westward into Europe. This was done in part to prevent countries like Greece and Turkey and Iran and Iraq from getting involved, Saudi Arabias, the Jordans of the world. This was done in large part to prevent that Soviet expansion into the Middle East of the world. Plain and simple. It was also done, make no mistake about it, to protect the foreign oil interest of the United States, both in that area and throughout the Middle East. That's clearly what it was. We know this to be true, that when it comes to foreign policy in the United States, it has been written official policy since the 70s that the United States will do anything and everything to protect their overseas and foreign oil interests in the name of national security and protecting our national interests. This is well documented. So if it was documented starting in the 70s, you definitely know that it was undocumented but officially or unofficially official policy going back to the 40s and 50s. And my whole thing is with the support of the State of Israel. And again, we must depart ourselves from the BS. We must separate what we've been led to believe, that this is a religious issue, and come to grips with the reality of the situation, that this is about power. This is about political plays. This is about having a pro-Western government in place in the most volatile area in the world, in the Middle East. There is no question about it. There are all types of strategic principles and purposes for why the U.S. has been Israel's by far biggest supporter and biggest ally over the past almost 70 years now. And at some point in time, this madness must stop. It must stop. How ridiculous is it in this country, with this country, that we sit there and provide more foreign aid to Israel in our history and currently today than any country in the world by far? What does Israel bring the United States in return to be able to justify that amount of expenditure? You look at the agreement, and these are just official things. We're not even talking about the under the table and around the way, around the bend type of support. You talk about that 10-year, $31 billion agreement that Bush signed off on to provide military and foreign aid to Israel over 10 years, $31 billion, whereas our budget deficits every year are in the trillions. Our national debt is over $17 trillion. And all the while, we continue to fund Israel. We continue to provide them more foreign aid than anybody else in the entire world. Number one, I asked the question, where is the authorization in the United States Constitution to take money from poor people in this country and from the taxpayers of this country in order to give that money to rich people in poor countries like Israel? Where is the authorization in the Constitution? Please let me know where this foreign aid is constitutional in any way, shape, or form. Furthermore, all that's happening is we're creating more volatility for ourselves. We are threatening our own national security and safety by sitting there and continuing to prop up this Zionist state of Israel. There is no question about this. What type of friend is this that sits there and makes enemies for us out of so many other countries in the world? What type of friend is this that puts us in such vulnerable straits with so many countries in the world, leads to so much anger and resentment, in particular in the Muslim world, that does occasionally lead to some terrorist type, so to speak, of activities? You have to wonder, why are they doing this? Maybe it's because we're supporting a country that is violating a lot of international human rights laws and a lot of individuals' basic, fundamental, God-given, so to speak, human civil liberties for the sake of propping up their Zionist state. Yet again, if you talk about this, though, and you question this in any way, shape, or form in this country, you're labeled an anti-Semite, you're labeled an anti-Jew, you are labeled this, you are labeled that, and labeled all of these things that still don't manage to properly and fully address the issue. They don't fully address the problem. Again, what does Israel do for us as a country? I'll wait for your answer. You don't know, because the answer is they don't do anything to fucking help us as the American people. They do absolutely nothing. Here's the stupidity of all this. We send billions of dollars every year to a country that gives us nothing in return. We send billions of dollars to a country every year that, if anything, continues to proliferate and create an environment of anti-U.S. hostilities in the Middle East and, frankly, spreading throughout Europe and Asia and all across the fucking world. What type of sense does this make? It makes absolutely none, except from a politician's standpoint, where they could sit there and send our money without any constitutional ability to do so, without any ability to ever be challenged, because nobody has the balls to be able to question it, because after so many years of the narrative being set and the pro-Zionist Israel state propaganda being pounded into people's heads for multiple generations, people don't want to talk about this. People are afraid of this. This is like the hot button issue that everybody feels is nuclear. I mean, this is ridiculous. We create a situation where we support a state that we didn't have a business supporting. We continue to create a situation where they are dependent on us, and all we are doing is giving them our tax dollars, our money, and not even technically that. Our federal government is borrowing that money, making us as citizens even more slaves to our debt, which is ultimately the way to control society, not to take away your guns, you idiots that believe that, make us slaves to the debt, and they can do whatever the hell they want with us. So they borrow us even further into debt to give monopoly, artificial money to the Israelis, so that way Israel can buy our weapons and ammo and our nukes and everything else, therefore supporting the real winners in all of this, the industrial military complex. What type of friend is Israel that when we went over to Afghanistan and Iraq, they sent exactly 0 troops to help support the cause? And the spin, of course, was given, well, we didn't want them there because that would just ramp up the hostility and the anger towards us. Well, maybe there is a clue, ding-dong, dumb dicks, that there is a problem here. Maybe there's a clue here, ding-dong, dumb dicks, that they're not our friends. Maybe there's a clue here, ding-dong, dumb dicks, that it is time to let them be. It is time to stop supporting them. It is time to stop taking money out of poor people's hands here. It is time to stop borrowing ourselves into an even bigger system and cycle of debt, all to support the industrial military complex in this country in order to be political power players in the Middle East, to try and make sure that we keep close dibs on the oil supply. Okay, what does that mean? Prices are still skyrocketing. All this control over the oil supply is all about just getting more of the supply for yourself and still being able to manipulate the demand and artificially inflate and explode the prices, which you have seen with the price gouging that has gone on with the price of a barrel of oil and your prices ultimately as a consequence at the pump over the past several years in this country. Why are we sitting there supporting other governments that kill people like the Israeli government clearly does? Why are we sitting there and supporting what, in my opinion, is just like some of these other countries that have been labeled so, a state sponsor of terrorism like Israel? Why are we still doing this? Why are we taking billions of dollars that we can't afford to spend, that we have to borrow ultimately, that we tax the taxpayers with having to sit there and pay off someday, to support them, where all they do is give that money back to the industrial military complex so the whole cycle keeps continuing? Make no mistake about it. If Israel is our friend, I'd hate to see what our true enemies actually look like. I have nothing against the people of Israel. I have nothing against Palestinians. I think this is another clear and present example of the U.S. needing to mind its own damn business and get the hell out of everybody else's affairs. Furthermore, I think it is ridiculous and unconstitutional to be borrowing billions of dollars every year that we can't afford to borrow, that we eventually as taxpayers will have to pay back without our authorization or approval, to unconstitutionally take that money from us and poor people in particular in this country and give it to rich people in poor countries so that way they can oppress and kill others. Does that make any sense whatsoever? And maybe it's time for people in stupid America to really evaluate and really analyze the situation. If everybody else hates this country, and it seems like we're the ones propping them up, and we're the only ones that really go to bat for them and truly support them no matter what, then maybe they're not as much of a friend as we think they are. Maybe they're not as good of an ally as we've been led to believe over the years. It is time for the U.S. to start taking care of the U.S. It is time for America and the people of America to stop being so stupid. It is time for America to let Israel be. It is time for America to bring our money home, to bring our troops home, to bring our resources home, and actually focus on true national defense and security. That is not helped and is in fact hindered and hurt significantly by our continuous support of the Zionist state of Israel. Ultimately, as I mentioned earlier, if Israel is our friend, then what does that make our so-called enemies?